Hi, folks. Steve Urban here. Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by Marketing 360. My good friend JB Kellogg and his team do such a fantastic job for us and so many other companies. Marketing 360 is the number one platform for small business, and it's everything you need to grow your business. If you need marketing support, I really encourage you to contact them at marketing360.com/Riderflex, and we'll add that link to the description of this episode for easy reference. On today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, we have guest Pat Schneider. He's the Senior Vice President and Head of Human Resources, People, and Culture at RLH Corporation. Great conversation with Pat about job interviews, job candidates in general, company culture, career advice, resume advice. I think you'll enjoy the conversation. Pat Schneider on the Riderflex podcast. How you doing, Pat?
I'm doing great. I appreciate being here. Thanks for the opportunity, Steve.
You bet. Now you're in Denver, aren't you?
Yeah, my wife and I live on the south side of Denver, in a little town outside of Denver, and we moved here quite a while ago, back in '99, to enjoy the fresh air and the mountains, and we take every opportunity we can to get up there and hike and ski and bike and take full advantage of it. So
It's a beautiful state to live in, isn't it?
it absolutely is 100%.
Now, are you from Wisconsin originally?
I am from Wisconsin
I,
originally.
I
Yeah,
just
so
I just happened to see that jersey in the background, that Brett Favre jersey for those people
yeah,
listening to
big
this
big
show.
big fan of the Packers and all things cheese. So yes,
Did you see Favre play at the stadium?
I have, and I've never been to a Packer game where they have won. So I have seen him play a few times.
Oh, bummer.
It's always magical. My wife is from Chicago, so we got to see Chicago versus Green Bay a few times, and
Cool.
I must have been the jinx. So
Did she grow up a Bears fan?
she does. She did. Yeah. So
Oof,
it's every
oof.
Christmas is always a great time with her and her family.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah. I
Yeah.
see the Favre jersey in the background. Oh, that's cool. My youngest son was a huge Favre fan too, so I can relate.
Great.
He was magical. He was
He
magical.
was. Yep. Yep.
Uh, n-
Absolutely.
so tell us a little bit more about you personally before we get into the professional stuff. Other than the fact that you're from Wisconsin. So yeah, a little bit about
Yeah.
your childhood or your parents, your siblings, whatever you want to share.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, as most towns in Wisconsin are. My mom was a general manager at a Ramada Inn, and so I grew up
Oh,
working in the hospitality industry from a very young age.
I see.
The day after I graduated from college, I packed up my little car, threw everything I had, which wasn't much, moved to Colorado on my own, so that I could ski as much as possible, and at the same time find a real job, air quotes, real job, right? So um, that fairly humble beginnings, but very strong family unit. Much of my family is in North Dakota, Minnesota, working the farms and the small communities there. So I like to think that that's carried over into my work culture. I have three daughters in high school, so
Wow.
outside of right now, this house is normally jamming, especially on the weekends. So they keep us so busy. We have two swimmers and a cheerleader, so there's always something going on around here, which is
Ah,
fun. It's a
I
great place.
I bet you said teenagers. What are the ages? What's the range on that?
Uh, uh, 14 to 17.
Ooh, yeah, yeah, it's busy at your house. And of course, now
Yeah.
we're recording this episode on April 29th, 2020. Coronavirus situation still, pretty much in effect. So your daughters have been home now for, let's see,
7 weeks.
see-
Se- 7 weeks. Yeah.
yeah, you didn't even have to think about it. You're like, no, I know exactly how many weeks.
Yeah,
7 weeks.
we just celebrated and apologize for the dog barking
No,
in the
no worries.
background.
Yeah, no worries.
um, we loaded up our vehicle to head to the mountains to do some skiing, and as soon as we unpacked the vehicle, they closed down the mountains. And
Oh,
we have been in quarantine. Well, not quarantine, but
yeah, yeah.
We've been at home ever since. So it's been 7 weeks. They're working hard. They get up every morning and they do their schoolwork. They try to spend time on the phone or FaceTime with their friends. But these are interesting days, and I'm sure we could do a whole nother podcast
We
on
could do a
that,
whole,
right?
yeah,
So
we sure could. I'm surprised that your internet is even working right now with all the downloading and streaming they're doing in the house, right?
yeah,
Uh,
it does get strained from time to time.
so many people that I've interviewed and talked to over the last few weeks, they're telling me how they're having to manage the bandwidth at home, and a certain kid has to be on hotspot, and a certain kid has to
Mm.
do this, and
It happens. It
and
happens. Yeah.
the husband and wife both trying to work from home. Okay, so
Yeah.
you drove out to Colorado with your stuff in a car back when it was back before the what we have, the 2016 2017 boom, or whenever that was, the last few
Yeah.
years. So you did that a long time ago. Okay,
Yeah.
you got out here, and then what? Talk to us about that early career. Walk us through your career a little bit.
Yeah. So you know, growing up in the hospitality industry, that's how I worked my way through high school and college. So I immediately joined up with a hotel in Colorado Springs, started waiting tables there, being a bartender, and quickly worked my way into supervisory roles. And that was my door into human resources.
Mm,
Once I started in human resources as an HR coordinator, it went fast from there. So, heavy payroll, heavy recruitment, heavy employee relations. I was transferred from Colorado Springs to downtown Philadelphia.
what?
Glorious, beautiful hotel. The Bellevue Stratford Hotel is a wonderful place. But yeah, coming from Wisconsin to Colorado Springs, which is still a very small town, to downtown Philadelphia was a
Wow.
big culture change for me. So
Big time. Okay.
yep, was there about a year, and then I was transferred to Seattle, which it's hard to believe that Seattle and Philadelphia are part of the same country. It really is. They're both beautiful and special in their own way,
uh,
but at the same time, they
uh,
could not be more different.
right.
Spent 3.5 years in Seattle, and then which is a great place, so much fun there. And then was transferred back to Denver to lead the HR function at a hotel in the Denver Tech Center.
Okay.
Through a series of acquisitions and mergers, decided to leave the industry and join ADT Security Services in Aurora, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
They are 24/7 operation. They are the largest service
Mm-hmm.
provider of security services in the world. And that I learned a great deal there. That was heavy recruitment, heavy employee relations, 1,000 people. It was a truly turning point for me where I realized that I really needed to continue to up my game in order to stay competitive in the HR field. And this will come up a little bit later,
Mm-hmm.
right, in the conversation. So I jumped into a master's program with Colorado State University. It was life changing. I learned so much. I met so many great people that I'm still dear friends with today.
Mm.
Through that, met the recruiter at Oppenheimer Funds. They lured me away to join them, and spent 13 glorious years with Oppenheimer Funds. Um,
Very nice.
working my way up the corporate ladder, and along the way, receiving uh, accolades from various different industries and best places to work, for the way we worked with and treated and benefited our people. So, for example, the Denver Post awarded us top places to work in Denver for 7 consecutive years, and
Ooh.
it's not all that common. So,
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. Yeah, congratulations.
if Fortune magazine recognized us as a great place to work. Fathers recognize this as a good place to work. Working mothers recognize this as a good place to work. So the variety and the diversity of the type of people that we touched and the organizations that recognized this was just heart touching, right? So
Congratulations.
thanks. We had a great team. Still have a lot of friends from there. We were acquired in 2018, and much of the operation was closed down as a part of that acquisition. So at that point, I had a number of job opportunities for similar roles, similar jobs. I chose one with RLH. Um, it is a head of HR job, and I chose it because it seemed harder. It seemed more difficult. It seemed to be more of a stretch. And another thing that we'll talk about a little bit later is the need to constantly evolve. Much like when I jumped into the master's program, I saw this as yet another opportunity to continue to progress and evolve and avoid complacency in my career. So
Mm.
I took the job just about 1 year ago now, and wow, not only have I learned a great deal in that amount of time, but every day now is a learning opportunity. To be a HR leader in the middle of a pandemic and
Right.
economic collapse is there's no training manual for this, right? There's no
That's
one that's
right.
been through it before.
That's right.
It's a community effort, not just a company effort. So I'm working with some great leaders across the city of Denver and the state of Colorado to ensure that our people have a voice within the state conversations, right? So that our governor hears our people, our mayor hears our people,
Mm.
and it's really a mind blowing experience, and I hope God gives me the wisdom to make the right choices.
You know, you brought up something that I haven't mentioned on the last few recordings, and that is this experience, going through this coronavirus and this economic, meltdown that we're in as an executive, whether it's an HR executive or a CEO or whatever, the experience and that's going to give people is going to, I mean, it's a once in a lifetime deal. I mean, you're going to talk about this 10 years from now and say, hey,
Oh,
you're going to say, hey, spring of 2020, listen, I've been through that. So whatever else we're faced with, no problem.
yeah, I think my CEO, John Russell, put it into perspective for me. He's an older gentleman, and he says, "I've been through Vietnam, I've been through 9/11, I've been through the Great Recession, and I've never been through anything like this."
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it is a once in a lifetime deal. It's going to be, even though it's very hard and difficult and scary, there's a silver lining there. And that's all the experience it's going to give all the executives like yourself. You're right.
Yeah, yeah.
And an opportunity to do a lot of great things in the middle of bad news.
And frankly, that's one of my lessons that I really have for not only your listeners but of my staff. In that, when you go into any given year or any given job and you have a plan, right? 2020 is going to look like this. I guarantee you that the end of that year will never look the same as the beginning of it. Something will disrupt you. There will be
Absolutely.
turbulence in your way, and if you time it right, and if you read the cards right, and if you're prepared and you're agile, you could take advantage of that. And now, I would never want to say that in
Yeah.
this situation I'm taking advantage of it, but
Yeah.
the reality is you
Yep.
have to do something to react to it. And if you can turn it into something positive for your company, for yourself,
Yes.
for your people, then do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can't even imagine what you've been through. Because how many employees, RLH, how many employees total?
Yeah, it fluctuates wildly, but it's a 500 person company that is down to just about 200 right now because of the situation.
Yeah, you know, layoffs and furloughs, you've obviously had to do a bunch of those in your career, even before
Hmm.
this, right? Just at various
Yep,
times, right? I
absolutely.
mean,
Yep.
somebody with your track record has had to live it, and you're in HR, so it's part of your life. I've always found it fascinating. It never gets easy, right? It just never gets easy. As many layoffs, as many terminations as I've done, I was a former CEO and COO, and it sucks.
Yeah,
Just there's no other way around it.
it absolutely does. It absolutely does. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
it's a terrible thing to have to do. And I I respect the fact that you've had to go through a bunch of stuff lately. I know it's been painful, but how about this then? That's a good segue.
Mhm.
So for today's job seeker, you know, April 29th, 2020, you're trying to look for a job in this market.
Yeah.
That's, first of all, it's tough to look for a job if you're unemployed anyway. It's always kind of a scary deal. But what if you're unemployed in today's world? Any advice or any words of wisdom you want to share with those listeners?
Yeah, there's a couple things, and first of all, if you're looking for a job today in this market, and if there's anything that I or my network or my company can do for you, we absolutely welcome that opportunity, whether it's
Cool.
resume review or putting you in touch with someone that we may know. Let me lead with that. We're all in this together, and my people are committed to you. Um, there are a lot of, so I think the word of advice would be leave yourself open to new opportunities.
That's good.
Um, and if you see the world as you've always seen it, it could be very gloomy and doomy at times. But and I could say this from a non-emotional perspective. I know it's not so easy being in the thick of things, right? There are a lot of companies out there hiring right now.
Mhm.
There are a lot of industries that have slowed and maybe pumped their brakes, but they have not stopped. And they are continuing to progress, and they will progress even faster on the other side of this thing. So, number one, don't lose hope, but don't look to replace exactly what you had with this new role. Leave
Great
yourself
advice.
open to some possibilities, and look to your left and look to your right.
Mhm.
um
That's good stuff. Yep.
yeah
Total.
I,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
picking up on a job search at this point is difficult, and it's very emotional. But after you go through that kind of change curve, that would be my advice. Seek those people that you have worked with and pull up your network, and get to work on your network, right? So.
It's so important. By the way, that's a great segue into my next question, which is, what are some common mistakes you see people
Mhm.
make when they're in the middle of their search or in the middle of an interview? Maybe that's a two-part question. Common mistakes you see, and the reason I'm asking that is because I think a lack of networking is a common mistake.
Yeah, 100%. And if we could separate ourselves just a little bit from our current situation, which is it has impacted a lot of people for no fault of their own.
Right.
More generally, right?
Yep.
There's two things that I would advise everyone to do, and we spoke briefly about them, and as we recapped my work history. Number one is always evolve and enhance your skills.
Mm,
Every year you should have some sort of developmental
good.
opportunity on your resume. It could be small, it could be personal, it could be professional, doesn't matter, but continue to learn. Learning doesn't stop at college.
Mm,
Okay,
good
it
stuff.
it continues. um, Number two is all about the networking. 80% of the time you find jobs, and jobs are filled because of a networking situation. So um, yeah, there's a term ABC, right? It's always be connecting, and I would say you should network like you're looking for a job, because if you have to start networking and building your skills at the point that you don't have a job,
Mm,
you are months behind the eight ball. Constantly reach out, constantly put new people into your LinkedIn network, constantly work those connections, stay in touch with them, and generally care about others, and lead with that empathy, and lead with the desire to help and stay in touch with people, so that when you need it and you come a knocking, they're going to be ready and open you with open arms. Waiting until you're unemployed, it's a tough uphill battle at that point. So.
Pat, you're man. That was awesome. I love that speech right there. I've done so many podcast episodes on those topics. I love it when guests come on the show and just reiterate, some of the things we've been saying. I where I find it most common is with people that think they're in a secure job because they've been there 10 plus years. They
Yep.
work for a big company, and so they're like, I'm safe over here. I don't need to network, and I don't need to build relationships, and I don't have time for all that. Those are the people that get themselves in trouble.
They become complacent, and I can see it happening. I was that person at one time too. It just happened to a person that I know last week. Someone who is a real up and coming female in the HR world, very dynamic, very well networked, and she didn't see it coming. But the difference is that she's ready. She's networked, she's connected, she has a persona about her.
Yep.
So she's going through some disappointing times, and I know she's going to land on her feet. I mean, I would love to hire her, and I know a lot of other people would too. So the difference is are you able to bounce back? It's like, I don't know who said it, but it's not how hard you get hit, it's about how fast you get back up. So
That's right. That's right.
and
That's right. I can share a story that's similar, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. I had a guy, a service provider that comes by the house. I won't name the service so that listeners can't try to figure out who it is, but service provider. He's in his 50s, probably early 50s. So I had a relationship with him. When we have a problem at the house for something, that this guy would come over and take care of it. And I'll call him Johnny. His real name's not Johnny. And he got laid off, and he calls me and he says, "Hey, he goes, I know you own that Riderflex, that recruiting firm, right?" He's like, "Can you help me?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Yeah, I'll help you as much as I can. Tell me what's." He goes, "Well, I don't really have a resume. I haven't had a resume. Never really had one. And there's something about a LinkedIn profile. I don't have one of those either. And I don't really know." And I just, I thought to myself, this is what happens. This is what
uh,
happens. People get comfortable. They don't work on building up their resume. They don't keep track of their accomplishments. They
yeah,
don't build it.
yeah,
They don't build network on. They don't build a network on LinkedIn. And then they're 53 years old and scared, and, and way behind
yeah,
the eight ball. And so I just want to encourage the listeners, not only do the networking like you're supposed to, but keep your information up to date. Keep track of
right,
all
yeah,
those awesome things you're accomplishing, because it's really easy to,
celebrate.
yeah, celebrate it. And it's hard. It's really difficult to sit down at the age of 50 and go, okay, let me think of all the things that I kicked ass on the last 25 years. Like you're
Yeah.
gonna forget some.
If
Go ahead.
if I could divulge you a little bit more, so at Oppenheimer Funds, we had started, again, a great team. Folks like Nate Thompson, if you ever get the opportunity to spend some time with him, he's a brilliant, brilliant person.
Cool.
Christine Menard. Several years ago, we recognized that the future of work will not be the same as the current state of work.
Mm-hmm.
So we, in strong partnership with our business folks, began preparing ourselves. Now, Andy Doyle, another one, brilliant, began preparing our people for the future of work, right? We had envisioned disruptions in technology and globalization and all the standard things, right? And we had developed an on-site career hub where people could go and understand what direction is the company going. How do I align with that? Where are my
Nice.
deltas? Do I
Nice.
even want to do this? If I don't want to do this, that's another conversation, and we support you in that. But we started developing these people, and they started getting excited about it. And then we were acquired, and then we were being shut down. And you know what happened?
You helped people. They were ready.
Steve, it
They
was
were ready.
beautiful. I,
They were
I
ready.
came to tears. These people were ready. They
That's great.
embraced the change. They showed up with resumes, and they
That's
showed
great.
up with elevator pitches. And we had the largest job fair in Denver history. That's a bit of an
Beautiful.
exaggeration. I get it, but the recruiters were just in awe of the caliber of our people, and not only the caliber, but the spirit of these people.
Mm.
And people rose to the occasion, and it was probably the pinnacle of the success in my career, was seeing these people march towards their new future, not afraid but ready.
I love that. And for the listeners too, I don't think Pat's saying, and I'm not saying either, that you should constantly be looking for another job. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying we're saying is it's almost, I relate it to car insurance. It's a little bit like car insurance, like having your network up to speed, your LinkedIn updated, your resume updated, good relationships, and being present in the marketplace. It's just like it's like having that little insurance card in your glove box. You might need it someday.
Yeah, yeah. The Center for Creative Leadership would tell you, you got to keep your personal house in order, your physical health, your spiritual health. I would
Mm-hmm.
introduce you got to keep your whatever you want to call it, business health in
Mm.
order, and every now and then just pay a little attention to it. Keep
Yep.
it progressing, just like you would going out for a walk every day, or
Yes.
going out for a run every couple of days, or going to whatever religious institution you choose to. Um, you got to constantly reinvest in your professional career.
By the way, one of the best ways to do that for you folks listening to this episode that aren't the most organized people, is put it on your calendar. Just make a little note on your calendar, whether it's once a month, once a quarter, just a little reminder that pops up that says update LinkedIn profile or whatever. I mean, it's just you
Yep,
almost have to set aside time to do it and plan for it, or you just won't. Um,
totally agree.
how about this? You've interviewed just a few people in your career. Okay, let's talk about job interviewing for a minute. How about this? How about common missteps you see made, and then some general positive advice behind that?
Yeah. Uh, a common mistake and it happens all of the time, right? People not being prepared, that didn't do their research, right? Starting with the job description itself. So there's two or three things, right? Number one,
Oh, man.
read the job description and then translate what the
Yep.
job or the company is asking for into what you've done. You got to make that match. And I could talk about that in just one second. Number two, you've got to do some research on the company, because one of the questions you're going to get is, why do you want to work here? Right? I'm
Exactly.
apparently preaching to the choir here, right?
I'm
And
sorry.
then
I'm just, yeah.
And then if you want to get some extra credit points, do some research on the person that you're talking to. Oh, I
Right.
see you're a Green Bay Packer fan. Hey, how about that Brett Favre, right? I mean, it doesn't hurt. It only helps, because we're looking for some sort of connection. As a human being, we want to connect with you. We really, really, really do. And those three things demonstrate that you have the capacity and the fortitude to think through a situation and act on your feet, right? The advice would be, in addition to doing those research on those three things, is use recognize the necessity to be able to answer behavioral-based interview questions. So,
Mm.
um,
Give us some examples. Yeah, go for it.
yeah. So let's say that in the job description, it says something about overcoming obstacles, right? You have to figure
Yeah.
out how to overcome obstacles to meet the customer's demands. You should be ready for a question that says, give me an example of a time that you overcame an obstacle. And then it's SBI, situation, behavior, and impact. What was the situation? What was the behavior that you demonstrated? And what was the impact of that behavior?
Ooh, that's
There
good
was a
stuff.
right?
Good
There
stuff.
was a
That's good stuff.
time, and you got to be specific. If you talk philosophical, like, well, this is what I would do, game over. I don't want to hear what you would do. I
uh,
want to hear what you did do, because the likelihood that you do something similar, um,
Ooh,
it increases. And even if you did it wrong or made a mistake, that's beautiful, because that means you learned from it and you recognized it and you're stronger because of that mistake. So doing it wrong the first time is perfectly acceptable. Don't
that's
make stuff up. Don't beat around the bush, and don't over talk your interviewer.
right. That's really good advice, Pat. Really good. Those three things you mentioned up front: studying the job description, studying the company, and studying the person you're going to be interviewing for. Like, I,
Yeah.
I don't know how many guests have been on the Riderflex show and we've covered this topic, and how many daily tips I give. And every single day we interview candidates and they just don't do it. I'm just blown away by it. I just, sometimes I hang up the phone, I'll go in the living room at the end of the day and my wife's like, what's wrong with you? And I'll just shake my head and go,
I just don't get it.
I just don't get it. I don't, you know, and so, by the way, sometimes these are seasoned professionals.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a just out of school college kid and a seasoned professional. They interview the same way. Like,
They do,
hey,
right?
I'm here.
I'm here.
Love me.
Yeah. So you're so right. How about this? Can I ask a couple of questions on selection of candidates real quick? Curious to get your thoughts here. If you got two candidates in front of you and one of them is a perfect match on paper, checks all the boxes on paper, whatever, 10 years of experience, sold coffee tables. They wanted somebody that sold coffee tables, wholesale, so let's just, checked all the boxes from an experience requirement perspective. The other one was a great salesperson, but had only sold, I don't know, lampshades, and hadn't sold coffee tables, but their culture matched, or their personality matched the company culture better. Who do you go with generally?
Yeah, yeah, easy answer. It's not about the perfect match. It's about the culture and the ability to learn and the ability to flex, right? So when I talked earlier about when you plan a year, the year's never going to go as it is supposed to. That's the same thing for the perfect match, right? So if you find a person that's perfectly matched and anything changes, right?
Ooh,
The
ooh, oh,
customer, the
great.
anything changes. The boss, they're no longer going to be a perfect match. So you want somebody who is agile
That's good.
and has demonstrated the ability to flex in their career. So I'm a culture guy, right?
Yeah.
I geek out on culture, and that's really where my priority is. And I
That
spend a lot of time digging into core competencies as opposed to hard skills.
such a great point about the fact that things are going to change anyway. So it doesn't matter if they're a perfect match on paper. Ooh, that's a podcast episode. I'm gonna do a daily tip on that one. That's a good one.
All right.
How about these folks that so Riderflex, we're all about, like, our whole, like, if you look up Riderflex, you're gonna see, we try to match personality to culture. Like, that's our kind of our big focus, right? Our big value prop. And we're not the only ones that do that, but that's, we preach that a lot. And now there are some people that would say, oh, this is the problem with companies. They're always trying to, hire for culture, and that's not fair because they're trying to hire five Johnnies instead of being diversified in their approach, and blah, 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 and hire different, different types of personalities and styles. And that's better for the company. What are your thoughts on people that say that? Because I've had a few of those folks on the show too.
Yeah, well, I think they're not necessarily the same, right? So I believe very firmly in diversity and inclusion, and not only
Yeah.
from a gender or social economic or whatever case.
But from a
um,
style,
yeah, from a thinking perspective, right? I want people that
Gotcha.
think and act differently than I do, but that doesn't
Mhm.
mean that that our values are any different, that our
Ah,
core competencies are any different. How we are wired and how we express ourselves and things that we're interested in are very, very different. So they're not exclusive or inclusive of one another. Um,
ah,
I if you're surrounded by people that are like you and think the same way, then you increase the likelihood that you're going to fail. So I would
mm.
say that person who's articulating that is only seeing a small piece of the picture.
How about this? Can we go just a little bit deeper on that? Because here's a challenge question for you. So let's say Riderflex has a client that we're trying to fill a position for, and I know that the environment is the office environment is what I would describe as intense. You know, loud voices, lots of curse words, fast talking, super aggressive, in your face, kind of style, right? It's just the
Okay.
way the way the owner and the CEO and the VPs is just how they this is how they act. Um, I would be cautious, I think, about putting a very introverted, quiet librarian type personality in there.
Yeah, you
What do
got
you?
to
What do you?
drill into Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
drill into, again, their core competencies. Does this person demonstrate high resilience,
Mm.
right? Um, are they assertive, maybe even aggressive, right? Um, the other thing I'm thinking about, so is this company, what are they looking for? Are they trying to change their culture? Are
That's
they
another good
happy
point.
with are they
Mm.
happy with, do they recognize that this is a challenge and they want to do something about it? Or they're like, no, 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 this is the way we are.
Ooh,
We're
good
going to
stuff,
stay
Pat.
that way,
Mm,
right?
mm, mm.
So that if they're good being in your face and yelling, then you want somebody that can go home at night and not being bothered by that confrontational situation. And there are plenty of people that are like that. That doesn't make that culture any better or worse. That is that culture, and that is what works for them. So we want to have a cultural match to that, and
Mm.
that's deeply different for every one of us.
Man, that's a great answer. Whew. Man, you've talked about these topics just a few times.
Yeah. Again, I've been
Uh,
lucky to work with some brilliant people. Trudy McKenna, who works at Google right now, just brilliant and helps me see things differently. And I've had people challenge me on my assumptions too. So it's been a journey.
really good stuff, Pat. I really appreciate you sharing that. So great career. Wrapping up here. Let me ask you a couple of wrap up questions.
Okay.
I mean, even if you stopped right now, you've had a pretty damn good career. I mean, congrats on everything you've done already.
Thank you. I apprate that. My
But you have,
daughters
but
won't let me though, so but
I
I
was
got to
just
keep
about to
going.
say, I was just about to say, you still have three daughters at home, so you can't retire yet.
Yeah.
Um, if you could call that young man coming out of school in Wisconsin and tell him anything today, if you could have a conversation with him,
Mhm.
what would you tell him?
Well, I would have to assume that that young man coming out of Wisconsin would want to listen to me, and that was part of the problem, right? That it's not a millennial thing, it's not a Gen Y thing. It's the desire to listen and take advice. So that would be the first thing is um, be a little bit humble
Mm,
and at least listen and consider the possibilities that are coming from this person and talking to you. Um, but there's a couple things that I would share with that individual. Take advantage of risky situations and bad times. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Forge strong relationships. Treat everybody good, and they will reciprocate. But those relationships that you build now will come back to you. Like, case in point, the person that hired me for my first job out of college. Remember that hotel I worked for in Colorado
yeah,
Springs?
yeah.
That person was the CEO of RLH and hired me, what, 25, 35 years later.
Wow. Oh, well,
Yeah,
there's
wild,
a
right?
there's a testimony. That's how important relationships are, right there.
It totally is, right? But the
Woo.
most important thing is this. In addition to everything that else that I said, at the top of that advice column is, young Pat, there's two types of people in this world. Type number one, and many of our fathers are like this, mothers and fathers, they work very, very hard. They show up every day and give them everything. They're good, loyal employees, and they expect that the company will take care of them. The second type of person shows up every day, works just as hard, takes care of the company, expects the company to take care of them, but they exploit the cracks in the sidewalk. They
Mm,
look for opportunities. They're not afraid of sticking their neck out and getting a little bit out over their skis. They
mm,
see
mm.
things that could be not the way they are, and they exploit them. Those that exploit the cracks in the sidewalk, both personally and professionally, tend to progress faster in organizations than the steady eddies, right? There's nothing
Oh,
wrong
that's
with
good.
them. They do great work, but the progression is faster for those that take chances and exploit the cracks.
Really good. Great stuff, Pat. Last question. Last question.
Yes, sir.
If you had to put your core purpose in life into a sentence, But I challenged you to push that beyond your wife and 3 daughters, because I'm assuming, let's just assume that's the automatic core purpose, is taking care of them for a minute. Let's kind of set that over here. If you pushed it beyond your immediate family and you had to define your core purpose in life, what would that sentence sound like?
That's a great question. I firmly believe that people have an intrinsic motivation to do their best. And my role is to create an environment where that intrinsic motivation is allowed to run rampant.
Mm.
That means that the elimination of policies that get in the way of their people, the reduction of corporate structures that force people into a box, right? I believe my core purpose is to allow people to thrive at whatever, however they see that they are driven to. It's in every one of us.
The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes. Wow, that's good,
and
learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide.
I've heard in a while. That's
Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Hey, thanks so much for listening. And if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.